asked my community what creative courses they would design for themselves if they could take anything, mainly because I was looking for ideas for myself. And the responses were incredible. Everything from the women artists that museums forgot to cooking with color theory. Amazing. Then I realized that most of us don't even know where to start when it comes to finding resources for all of the random creative interests that we want to learn. So in this video, I'm going to give you over 30 different ideas for creative personal curriculum courses that you can totally steal, plus exactly how to find resources to fill whatever weird combination of interests your brain comes up with. Because I genuinely think it's so much better when you follow your own curiosity instead of someone else's syllabus. So let's dive in. If we've never met and you have no idea what I'm talking about, hi, I'm Janelle, and this is a follow-up to last week's video, where I gushed about this TikTok trend about creating personal curriculums, where you design your own learning paths around things that you're genuinely interested in. The goal is to combat brain rot and to dive into things that actually excite you in a more intentional way. If this idea piques your interest, go back and watch that one first so you can get spun up on the general concept and how to get the whole thing structured, and then come back here because we're going to dive way deeper today. So I'm going to fire hose you with lots of specific ideas that I thought of, but first I want to go a little bit broader into how do you go about finding resources to build your own course of study no matter what you're interested in. This is the teach a man to fish portion, and I think it's really useful and not something we always think about. How do you go about finding resources for yourself? It doesn't always come easy, and I think it can be really helpful moving forward. A great place to start is to look for college courses that exist on your topic and then look at their resources. A lot of schools publish this stuff online, even their specific syllabus and reading list, and you can find a lot of those resources if you want to look at them. So you could search for Topic 101 course curriculum, or just topic syllabus, and see what comes up. This is obviously only helpful if the thing you want to learn is actually taught in schools, but it's a good jumping off point, even if you're a little bit more broad and you want to get more granular later. Something I've actually been doing a lot lately is asking AI to help me find resources around an interest. I know AI in general is pretty scary for creatives. You could see this whole video about my thoughts on that, but this is actually a perfect use for AI. It's great because they can do a really wide search for things that might be a little bit hard to find if you were just looking manually. You can also ask to look specifically for texts that are available online for free. There's actually a lot of open source information that is available for free if you know where to look, which is really amazing. For example, if you wanted to do a deep dive on typography and you asked AI this question, you would find that Eric Spiekerman's opus, Stop Stealing Sheep, is actually fully available online in partnership with a university. That kind of stuff is gold when you're looking for courses like this. And then obviously, there's the library. You do not need to spend money on this. And going to your local library and checking out all of your resources can be a really good way to feel like you're starting a class. There's also online library databases. And if you live in the United States, you can use the free Libby app to digitally rent any book that might be relevant to you. And librarians are great resources for finding interesting books in a particular topic. Talk to your librarian. And then there are the librarians of the internet, Reddit. Find a subreddit and ask this question and you will get flooded with book recommendations, I promise you. Something that I love to do is to find a book that I love and then flip to the back, go into the bibliography and look at all of the books that it cites. That's going to give you a really natural starting point to go down these rabbit trails and find similar books that would give you more information. It's a really good way to do a deep dive into a subject. And then think about more experiential learning. You might need to pay a little bit for these, but there are fantastic learning platforms where you can do a deep dive in a particular topic or do a really granular project. Most Skillshare classes are an hour or two, or even faster if you're a psychopath like me and listen to everything on 2 times speed. And you can do a really granular project. They even have learning paths if you want to learn about a broad topic, and they give you suggested classes of how to learn that whole thing, which is pretty cool. But there are a lot of other ones that can get really niche. Creative Live and Domestika and Masterclass. I'll put a list of some of my favorite ones down below if you want to dive into learning platforms to learn a different type of skill set. There are also a ton of free resources from angelic humans who have made educational content available for everyone. Things like Khan Academy and Crash Course can give you fantastic resourcing if you can find something on the topic you're interested in. And obviously there's YouTube, so the sky's the limit. Another thing that I love to do is go Wikipedia diving. Start with an article on the topic that interests you, and then follow the links. Learn about people and movements and places that are relevant to that thing. Follow the rabbit trail all the way down. It might not be the most deep dive that you can do on a topic, but it's a really good platform for getting a general overview of a thing. And then at the bottom of each page are a ton of sources. So you can follow that general idea down into original source documents that can really give you specific resources that you might not have found otherwise. Just getting nerdily into the source section of Wikipedia has led me to academic journals and new artists and experts that I would not have found otherwise. It can be a really interesting deep dive into a topic. And then think outside of books. There are documentaries and podcasts and TED Talks on just about any topic. There's a fantastic organization called Creative Mornings that have been doing talks on all kinds of creative concepts for years all around the world, and they have a huge library of expert talks on just about anything you could be interested in. It's a gold mine for really inspiring video content. And something I don't think a lot of people think about is that most museums have some form of virtual collection and a virtual tour. So even if you don't live near a particular museum, you can look at it online. You can look at their works, you can actually walk through their spaces and learn about their collection. It can be really beautiful. In short, there are a lot of ways to engage an idea without needing to do a ton of reading, if the thought of pulling out a textbook at 9 o'clock at night does not sound particularly relaxing. So that's how I would go about building a course for myself, really regardless of the idea. But now let's dive into some really specific concepts just to get your brain turning. I've broken these up into 5 main categories and then come up with really specific ideas within each of these fields of interest. You could take any one of these specifics that I give you, or you could use them to kind of brainstorm other ideas that pique your interest. Regardless, let me know in the comments what ideas interest you, because I would love to know what you get excited about. Okay, the first broad creative category is art history and cultural studies. This could be the aforementioned Women Artists Museums Forgot idea, which I am definitely going to go down, but it could be a bunch of other specific paths through art history. You could do color through cultures, where you look at how different cultures use colors symbolically and differently from each other. That's cool. Or Design Movements 101, where you choose a specific design movement like Bauhaus or Art Nouveau and do a deep dive on that history. Indigenous art traditions, where you explore beyond the European lens. Street art and social movements, art as political expression. Or something like fashion history through the decades, or Victorian interior design. Anything that piques your interest in a particular historical context and art movement could be a really cool place to work. Then there are hands-on art and craft skills. Any kind of medium or technique that you've just been wanting to dive into. Now's your chance. Watercolor fundamentals, hand lettering and brush scripts, collage and mixed media exploration, junk journaling, ceramics and clay, printmaking techniques, fiber art and textiles, botanical illustration, scientific illustration, bookbinding and paper arts, any kind of historical or hands-on craft or art that you just want to learn more about or get your hands on. This is a really cool way to build a class for yourself. And this doesn't have to be super serious or academic. There are a lot of really cool hobby kits that will just help you learn a new craft if you just want to get your hands into something. You can have fun and play around, but that still counts. Next, I'm calling technical skill development. Now, I'm going to keep this design focused because that's where my brain's at, but if you are a photographer or an interior designer or an architect or anyone, you could obviously gear this towards your field of interest. But if you are interested in design at all, you could do a typography deep dive, but also grid systems and layout. You could do logo design psychology or color theory and application, photography for non-photographers, or UX and UI principles, maybe something that scares you a little bit or feels intimidating. This is a good way to tackle that. Then there's what I'm calling creative business and personal development. Think if you're a creative person, especially if you're trying to do this thing professionally, there are a lot of books and ideas and concepts that sort of float around in the ether of the internet, and it tends to fall into that someday I'll read that category, at least for me. And I think that it would be useful to pick one of those books or concepts that you hear in the personal development space and use this structure to really dive into it. If there's a book you've been meaning to read, you have a built-in textbook for a class you make for yourself. So maybe you make a course called Atomic Habits for Creatives, or Full Engagement for the Creative Mind, The Creative's Mindset Makeover, or Pricing Psychology for Creatives. Anything in the personal development space leans itself very naturally into creating a course around it, and it can help you feel like you're not just reading a book quickly, but you're actually engaging with some ideas. Finally, I have what I think is the most fun category, which I'm calling interdisciplinary or experimental combinations. And what I mean by that is you can kind of take just about anything that interests you and combine it into your own unique path of study. So like I mentioned, cooking and color theory. There's a whole book about how to cook by color palette. How cool is that? Or you could do musical and visual rhythms, where you take music and try to interpret it in a visual medium. Psychology and user experience is a pretty common learning path. But you could do something more abstract, like travel and cultural design patterns. How different places have influenced pop culture and design movements. There's any number of combinations of science and art, like fractals or the Fibonacci sequence. If that excites your brain, you could go down a whole route of looking for natural patterns and scientific principles. That could be really fun. You could do literature and typography, how writing styles would translate into a visual voice. Or architecture and graphic design, how 3D and 2D could interact with each other. The options are kind of endless here. I think my favorite version of this would be to be inspired by a person. Take an artist or a historical figure that you really are interested in, and then do a deep dive. Read a biography or watch a documentary about their life, but then also try to make some sort of artwork or project inspired by them or their style. So you could learn about Frida Kahlo and watch the Selma Hayek movie, but you could also try your hand at making artwork inspired by her. It would be a really fun experiment, and a way of locking in that knowledge in a way that is now really personal. That's really what all of this is about. I think the most important thing here is to start with whatever genuinely excites you. Don't pick a topic because it would feel impressive or something you kind of feel like you should know. Pick it because you're curious. And if you create your own curriculum from any of these ideas, please tell me in the comments. I want to know what interesting combinations of things pique your interest. And if you want some specific book recommendations for my favorite resources for design and creativity, I've already done quite a few videos about this already, so I'll put that whole playlist here so you can see my favorite resources. I'll see you there.